Coming up on our newscast tonight. The special envoy of Chinese President Xi Jinping visits Seoul following the recent Beijing-Pyongyang summit. China's State Councilor Yang Jiechi meets with President Moon Jae-in to brief him on the unprecedented meeting. At a time when close coordination is crucial for Seoul and Tokyo to work towards peace on the region, Japan once again drives a wedge in bilateral ties with misguided claims to South Korea's Dokdo Island in high school teaching guidelines. With South Korea and the United States set to hold historic summits with North Korea within months, U.S. President Donald Trump puts the brake on the Seoul-Washington FTA deal, raising questions regarding his motive. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Once again, our starting point is the Chinese president's special envoy's visit to the nation. State Councilor Yang Jiechi met with President Moon Jae-in to brief him on the outcome of the Pyongyang-Beijing summit. Arirang Chief Cheongwade correspondent Moon Geon-young has our top story.
The Chinese President's special envoy Yang Jiechi met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in at the presidential Blue House Friday to brief the South Korean leader on the summit earlier this week between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Xi Jinping.
State Councilor Yang explained in detail the outcome of the North Korea-China summit, which took place on the occasion of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to China to President Moon. Based on the briefing, President Moon and State Councilor Yang carried out in-depth discussions on ways for successful bilateral summits between the two Koreas and North Korea and the U.S.
The Chinese official told the South Korean president that the China-North Korea summit will contribute to the Inter-Korean summit as well as the U.S.-North Korea summit expected to be held in May. The two also touched upon other areas of interest between South Korea and China. President Moon had conveyed his concern over the slow progress in China's removal of anti-THAAD measures through his national security advisor Chung Eui-yong, who held a meeting with China's special envoy Thursday evening. Those included normalization of Chinese tour groups to South Korea, resumption of Lotte's Shenyang construction project, and subsidies for electric cars equipped with batteries produced by Korean companies.
State Councilor Yang said President Moon should be able to see visible results very soon in these areas and asked for President Moon's faith in his words.
The Blue House spokesperson said while President Moon and State Councilor Yang spent half of their 70-minute-long meeting discussing the North Korea-China summit, as well as the North Korean leader's proposal for denuclearization to Chinese President Xi Jinping, he could not disclose the details of those talks, citing sensitivity issues. Instead, the Blue House announced that also thoroughly reviewed in Friday's meeting was the fine dust problem in South Korea, and the two countries vowed to bolster anti-fine dust cooperation, centering on the early launch of Korea-China Environment Cooperation Center in Beijing. Moon Geon-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
It's imperative South Korea and Japan work closer together than ever before to push for diplomacy with Pyongyang. Seemingly oblivious to this fact, Tokyo angers Seoul by revising high school teaching guidelines to state Korea's Dokdo belongs to Japan. Park Ji-won zooms in on the situation.
With the new teaching guidelines announced in the Japanese government's official gazette on Friday, Tokyo has created a legal basis to teach false and distorted information to its future generations. Publishers of school textbooks in Japan are now required by law to refer to Dokdo as Japanese territory. The textbooks for elementary schools should include such wrongful territorial claims from 2020, middle school books from 2021, and high school textbooks from 2022. Last year, the Japanese government also revised its legally binding teaching guidelines for elementary and middle school students to include incorrect territorial claims toward Korea's easternmost island, Dokdo. Back in 2008, Japan first started to include the provocative claim that Korea and Japan do not share a common understanding on Dokdo in its non-legally binding middle school teaching guideline commentary, causing strong protests and a backlash from the Korean government. So now it seems that for the last 10 years, despite official protests from Korea, Japan has made its education system, from elementary school to high school, teach students these false territorial claims. The South Korean government has strongly condemned the Japanese government's move, urging it to immediately repeal its legally binding teaching guidelines that make false claims over the Korean territory. Seoul's foreign ministry summoned the Japanese ambassador to South Korea, Yasumasa Nagamine, Friday morning, and South Korea's first vice foreign minister, Im Seong-nam, delivered the South Korean government's position, urging the Japanese government to repeal the wrongful guidelines. The Foreign Ministry also issued a statement that Dokdo is historically, geographically, and legally Korea's territory, which was first invaded and occupied during Japan's past attempt to colonize Korea, vying to sternly respond to any of such moves. The statement added that if Japan continues to fail to see its errors of imperialistic aggression in the past, it will lose a precious opportunity to learn from the past and prepare for the future. Korea's Education Ministry also issued a statement saying this move of historical distortion not only violates Korea's territorial sovereignty, but also damages the peaceful coexistence and mutual respect of East Asia. The Education Ministry stressed that the Japanese government should teach its future generations the preciousness of peace based on the correct view of history. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, another victim of Japan's heinous war sex crime has passed away, leaving the number of registered survivors at just 29 here in Korea. The Korean Council for Women drafted for military sexual slavery by Japan confirmed An Jung-sun, who was forced to serve in military brothels for more than 4 years during World War II, died today at the age of 90 in Suwon. An was one of the survivors who filed a lawsuit in 1993 seeking an official apology and compensation from the Japanese government. They lost the case at Tokyo's Supreme Court. She is the third victim to have passed away this year. The chief of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, sat down with North Korea's sports minister, the head of the regime's Olympic Committee, Kim Il-guk. According to the communist state's main outlet, Korean Central News Agency, the meeting took place at Mansudae Assembly Hall in Pyongyang today. The IOC said the discussions centered on the development of sports in the Hermit Kingdom. The duo reportedly touched on ways to keep the momentum from the successful participation at the recent Winter Olympics and Paralympics to prepare its athletes for qualifications so that they can participate in the Summer Games in Tokyo in 2020 and the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022. Bach led an IOC delegation on this 3-day visit to North Korea, which comes on the North's invitation following an agreement between the IOC, Seoul, and Pyongyang. The nation's foreign ministry announced newly declassified documents show North Korea suggested forming a neutral state on the peninsula. Lee Jung-yeon sheds light on the fascinating revelation from some 3 decades ago, just ahead of the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul.
Around 30 years ago in 1987, North Korea had suggested forming a neutral state on the Korean peninsula to form a buffer zone, according to declassified diplomatic documents. The 230,000-page documents disclosed by the Foreign Ministry on Friday revealed this proposal by the North, which was passed on in secret through Mikhail Gorbachev, then leader of the Soviet Union, to then U.S. President Ronald Reagan during a summit held at the White House on December 9, 1987. The contents of this proposal include withdrawing all foreign military presence from the Korean peninsula, writing up a peace treaty, and a new neutral state entity joining the United Nations under a single name. Washington, however, deemed the proposal unrealistic unless North Korea showed a willingness to establish trust. Seoul shared this opinion, especially as the contents were the same as what was proposed by former North Korean leader Kim Il-suk in 1980. As for the reason behind this proposal, experts speculate that it's because the regime did not want to be left out of the spotlight with the upcoming 1988 Summer Olympics in South Korea. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
The two Koreas and the United States have so many issues to cover during the upcoming summits. It's imperative for each side to clearly identify their priorities. One clear-cut objective for southern Washington is putting Pyongyang on course to peaceful denuclearization. Kim Il-guk helps us explore ways to make the most of this rare occasion.
The two Koreas held summit talks back in 2000 and 2007 to improve their bilateral relationship. The upcoming April summit talks will be the third historic meeting, but the stakes are higher with North Korea in its final stages of nuclear weapons development and a somewhat unpredictable U.S. President Donald Trump who even threatened a possible preemptive strike. So what are some of the key conditions for the talks to succeed and really help achieve a peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula?
The definition of denuclearization, that's what experts say, is critical above all else.
What South Korea and the U.S. mean by denuclearization is the North completely giving up nuclear weapons. But North Korea hasn't made clear yet whether it means giving up nuclear weapons, a freeze, or what. At the summit, Seoul needs to get Pyongyang to make this clear.
Previous talks failed. The North reneged on the signed agreements and continued to develop nuclear weapons. This time, before talking about any kind of give and take like economic rewards or North Korea normalizing relations with the U.S., South Korea needs to confirm the North's sincerity and its commitment to denuclearize if the talks are to succeed and if Seoul is to keep its alliance with Washington strong. But managed expectations from the Trump administration is also needed.
It will be helpful to get a better sense of parameters and manage expectations. If he goes into the negotiations and pushes Kim Jong-un to immediately, denuclearize, to agree to his conditions or else, I just hope that he doesn't come back and then listen to the very hawkish advice of his national security advisor, immediately ratchet up tensions and consider military option.
To keep the summit from falling apart, finding a realistic bottom line North Korea and the U.S. can agree on is key. The parties also need to keep holding preparatory meetings like the Track 1.5 talks between Seoul, Washington, and Pyongyang held in Finland last week. This is where South Korea's role and the Inter-Korean Summit serve as a bridge between Washington and Pyongyang. Another condition for the talks to succeed is that South Korea, which got the ball rolling on the summit, be able to deal with the variables and changing strategic dynamics. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's trip to Beijing is something that complicates the equation, which experts interpret as the North's attempt to enhance its negotiation position against South Korea and the U.S. amid the tensions between China and the U.S. over trade.
South Korea needs to cooperate with its neighbors and make sure the tough sanctions on the North stay in place. We're seeing a possible breakthrough in solving the North Korea crisis. It's like a puzzle, with the pieces representing many different interests. We need to put it together with caution and preparation, or else we're back to brinksmanship.
Kim Il-guk, Arirang News.
Expectations continue to grow for the historic inter-Korean event set for next month. But many analysts believe the talks are unlikely to deliver any immediate tangible results, especially when it comes to denuclearization. Our Park Hee-jun turned to some experts for their realistic views.
The date of the Inter-Korean Summit is set for April 27th, and the location, the southern side of the Choose village of Panmunjom. It will be the first time a North Korean leader sets foot on South Korean soil, and it could be a positive sign for inter-Korean relations. Hopes are high for the talks, which will focus on denuclearization and establishing a lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. But experts say that the summit by itself will not be decisive. Rather, it will just be a preparatory process for the upcoming possible North Korea-US talks.
Situation, the South Korean president can do very little. Any kind of meaningful economic exchanges will be seen as a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. And of course, the nuclear issue is going to be discussed between Pyongyang and Washington, not Pyongyang and Seoul.
And that North Korea will not give up its nuclear power.
The chances of North Korea's denuclearization are not low, they are zero. The North Korean government consists of smart, realistic, pragmatic people. They are not suicidal, And they understand that if they surrender nuclear weapons, they will be essentially defenseless. And if Kim Jong-un has such an idea, it's one of few issues where he is likely to encounter a very strong opposition among his own generals and his own public.
North Korea has sacrificed a lot to develop its nuclear weapons, so hoping for instant denuclearization would be unrealistic. Nuclear power for them is not just for military use or negotiation. It also has a political meaning, so it will be difficult for the regime to throw away all three values.
Instead, experts are saying that South Korea should set a practical goal to manage the nuclear issue, not solve it. At best, the summit will result in a freeze in the recently escalated tensions on the Korean peninsula. For the best results, the South would have to focus on creating a peaceful atmosphere for the next round of talks by making various exchanges and symbolic gestures that don't violate international sanctions. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump turned heads again, this time by saying he will hold up the recently amended Seoul-Washington trade agreement until a deal is made with North Korea. Speculation runs rampant over how exactly the unpredictable leader plans to use the FTA as leverage. Cha Sang-mi delves deeper to find out what could be the method to his sudden decision.
Before the ink had even dried on the newly amended South Korea-U.S. free trade agreement, President Trump said he may hold up the trade deal in order to use it as leverage in any upcoming negotiations with North Korea and their nuclear programs. Calling it a strong card, Trump made it clear how he wants to use the trade deal.
Just this week, we secured a wonderful deal with South Korea, and I may hold it up till after a deal is made with North Korea. Does everybody understand that? Do you know why, right? Do you know why? Because it's a very strong card. And I want to make sure everyone is treated fairly, and we're moving along very nicely with North Korea. We'll see what happens.
Major U.S. media outlets commented on Trump's remarks. The Wall Street Journal wrote that President Trump is leveraging the deal with South Korea for a deal with the North. Bloomberg said the timing of the trade deal will help Trump to negotiate with Kim Jong-un to ultimately abandon his nuclear ambitions. And according to AP News, the U.S. could extract better trade terms with South Korea, as a successful nuclear deal with North Korea is also in Seoul's interest. A local economic expert agreed with many U.S. press outlets that Trump may be trying to use the KORUS FTA as leverage and keep as many options as possible for the upcoming summit.
The first is to wait and see what happens during the summit with North Korean government, Kim Jong-un. And then the second reason, because President Trump has gotten a lot of criticism about the results of the KORUS FTA negotiations, so he may want to re-examine it, have time to re-examine it.
Another expert who wanted to remain anonymous mentioned that the KORUS FTA is just a start, and President Trump is likely to come up with more leverage against South Korea before he begins the nuclear talks with Kim Jong-un. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
In 2017, the Bank of Korea saw its biggest net profit in 16 years. The total profit declined on year, but total cost dipped even further. Lower interest rates meant it was cheaper to issue monetary stabilization bonds. These are bonds issued by the central bank to control the amount of money flowing in the market. According to the BOK's annual report for last year, total net profits came to some 3.9 trillion won, or $3.7 billion. This is the highest it's been since 2001, when the figure was around 4.2 trillion won. Turning to the latest figures on the nation's industrial output now, despite improvements in consumption and auto production, the data for February shows sliding on-year growth. Kim Ji-yeon helps us look beyond the numbers.
Despite an uptick in consumption, Korea's industrial output dropped by 0.8% in February compared to the same month last year, mainly due to sluggish growth in the construction sector. Statistics Korea says output in the construction sector dropped nearly 4% from the previous month, as orders plunged by nearly 39% on year in February. Most of the gains in output for February came from the mining and manufacturing sectors on increased automobile and semiconductor output. An official from the statistics agency says the shutdown of the GM Korea plant in Kunsan last month had little to no effect on the country's automobile output overall, although it has heavily affected the southwestern coastal city. Output in Jeollabuk-do province, where Kunsan is located, dropped to 0.7% from the previous month in February, slowing from near 4% growth in January. Retail sales increased by around 1% on increased sales of non-durable goods, such as clothes and vehicle fuel. Facility investment surged by more than 1% from the previous month, particularly investment related to shipbuilding and shipping equipment. Output in the services sector recorded a fifth straight month of decline, edging down 0.1% from the previous month due to the declining number of eateries, bistros, and bars. Kim Il-guk, Arirang News.
In recent years, more and more high schoolers have opted to skip further education. Natural progression, considering the number of jobs requiring a college degree, remain somewhat stagnant, while employment opportunity grows in sectors that require specific skill sets. Here's a follow-up to examining the surprising decline in college enrollment rates in Korea, courtesy of our Won Jung-hwan.
Even a few years ago, the unemployment rate was rising faster for high school graduates than college graduates. However, since 2013, the number of high school graduates in work has rebounded, while more and more college graduates struggle to find jobs. Before 2013, the changing labor market meant a fall in blue-collar jobs in the production and technical sectors. According to Statistics Korea, blue-collar jobs in Korea fell from 570,000 in 2000 to 330,000 in 2010. So as finding a job became difficult, further education seemed a better option, and the percentage of high school graduates enrolling in further education grew to more than 70% in the late 2000s. But since 2008, with an increase in the number of low-skilled service jobs and a rise in general wages, the high school graduate employment rate began to rise.
In the early 2000s, there were few jobs for high school graduates in the labor market. But after the global financial crisis, the demand for less skilled jobs increased amid the economic recovery and the change in the labor market.
While the demand for blue-collar jobs increased, the number of jobs requiring a college education stagnated. According to Statistics Korea, since 2011, while the employment rate for high school graduates increased by more than 10% in 6 years, for university graduates, it almost stayed the same. This trend seemed likely to continue in the near future, and some university students are questioning the need for a college degree.
Students not continuing their studies further could also mean that they are doing what they want to do. And to be honest, I have come to university because I was worried people might look at me in a different way if I do not have a degree.
I do not think that university is a necessary thing in our life, and nowadays I think that there is not much difference between getting a job after graduating from high school and getting a job after graduating from university.
If the employment rate for college graduates continue to stagnate, demand for further education could continue to fall. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach for the updates you need before planning your weekend. Michelle, I understand the warm conditions we are enjoying these days have made flowers bloom faster.
That's right, Daniel. The annual cherry blossom season is back in the country, a time when the whole country gets painted with hues of pastel colors. In Daegu and Busan, the cherry blossoms have already blanketed the streets, so for those of you near the southern regions, you definitely want to take a look at this weekend. And for those of you in Seoul, should wait another week to see the scenery. Now, it's been a refreshing day for a change, but into the evening, the west and the central regions will see ultrafine dust levels rising until tomorrow morning. Now, Seoul will begin the morning at 10 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon and Daegu heading up to 7 and 6 degrees respectively, while Busan is higher at 9 degrees. Into the day, Seoul reaches up to 18 degrees, while other regions could be seeing highs past the 20 degrees mark. Now, on Sunday, the day will be gloomy or rainy around the capital and around the surrounding regions. And afterwards, Warm, sunny weather will remain in place until Thursday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's it for tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. As always, thank you for staying with us. Have an incredible weekend.